Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome to another of our webinar Wednesdays on managing your small business through the pandemic. This is unfortunately episode number 54. So I've been here the last 54 weeks. Got a great program today, great guest, a lot of information, got breaking news right at the last minute. 11:45 a.m. breaking news. You got to love that. So good afternoon. My name is Kelly Bearden. I am the director of the CSU Bakersfield Small Business Development Center. And as many of you know, that we are the SBDC and we're located in downtown Bakersfield. And actually, we are part of the Central California region. And that Central California region includes the Central California's 14 greatest counties, as I like to call them, from the Pacific Ocean to the state of Nevada, down to the southern part of Kern County, all the way up to the tip of Mono County. And within that region, you can access SBDC services, of course, in Kern, Inyo, and Mono counties through our office associated with the School of Business and Public Administration at Cal State Bakersfield. But also there are offices in Clovis, in Merced, Modesto, in Salinas, and in San Luis Obispo. So if you have any issues, any questions, any comments, anything we talk about, any of those SBDCs can assist you today. So moving along, as you know, we've got to thank our sponsors for being here each week, and that includes the County of Kern, Mid-State Development, the School of Business and Public Administration, as mentioned. We're powered nationally with over 1,100 SBDCs across the country by SBA, and we are a economic development partner with the California Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, also known as GoBiz. So thanks to all of you, and for all of you for turning in today. A little bonus webinar this week in conjunction with the Kern County Hispanic Chamber of Commerce and the Kern County Black Chamber of Commerce, Mid-State Development. The SBD is sponsoring, and this is going to be very timely with my breaking news. We're going to be talking about the Targeted EIDL Advance, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Advance, for a full hour with really the guru of SBA's disaster unit in my book, Corey Williams. And Corey's been a very valuable asset going all the way back to when this started. I believe our first conversation went back to about the same time as our first webinar, when that was the only relief program open. The EIDL program, that has been extended through this year. But Corey will be joining us tomorrow from 2 to 3. So a lot on EIDL tomorrow and a lot on what you can do. And I think that, you know, in talking up EIDL a little bit, there's a lot of things, if you do have an EIDL loan, that you've got to remember. And Corey is a great resource for asking these questions tomorrow. For those of you that received the EIDL, you know that you had $100 deducted. And that $100 went to a UCC filing, a Uniform Commercial Code filing, that gave the SBA basically a blanket on your assets that you have. So you have to recall, if you have an EIDL, even if you sell a pickup truck, you need to go through SBA and get that proper clearance, because they are liened on your particular assets, even if they're not liened on any physical assets like real estate or whatever. So a great opportunity to get in and talk to Corey, and also to talk about our breaking news. Our breaking news is that just came out at 11:45, and it's going to go to the top on what's new today on March 24th. And that is the fact that, as I look over here, and it's about EIDL, it's about the economic injury loans, and there's an increase. There's an increase from SBA that's going to begin on April the 6th. And I haven't even read the entire press release that was just recently released. But what it is going to do is take the maximum loan amount from $150,000 and actually increase that back to the original amount of $500,000. So for many of our larger small businesses, that really the 150 was nice, but it really didn't quite feel the need for the amount of impact and the damage that they had. This is going to be welcome relief. So more on that tomorrow, I'm sure, with Corey. We'll have more on that next week. And as we get closer to that opening up on April the 6th, more to discuss on that. So breaking news, EIDL going up from 150 to 500. Okay, so what else is up? Well, I'm just chock full of good news this week, aren't I? We got a red tier that's returned to us today, and just some really positive Kern County numbers. If you go in and look at the numbers, which I think we'll do that. We haven't done it in a while. And I think that once we get in here, we're going to like what we see. So in kind of going and looking at those particular numbers, let's get in there, not those numbers, but these numbers. Look at this right down in here, Kern County, California, in the red tier. And okay, we've got the frowny face, but we got some really solid numbers, really, really good numbers. Apparently the portal doesn't want to. I think everybody's breaking down the portal to see that good news. But we have moved from the widespread to the substantial, which brings in indoor dining and some of the other factors. And we join much of the rest of the state that has already moved to the red county. And we still are seeing a lot of purple still linger in the San Joaquin Valley, where we see Kings and Fresno and Madera, Merced and San Joaquin County all still in the purple tier. Stanislaus joined us in the red tier this week, which I looked at the numbers and not near as good as those of ours of Kern County. So really the way we're trending and a lot of the other good news that's going on in vaccinations and other things, it's really, really positive that and really looks like we could actually even be growing toward the orange and moderate tier after we spend a couple of weeks in the red tier. So, which would get our restaurants and other businesses up to 50% capacity and other things. So just great news all around. Love being the bearer of good news. Bad news, not much of a fan. So what else is up today? Well, California State University Bakersfield is going to open the first mass vaccination site. And that's the tongue twister this week. I get one every week. Mass vaccinations will be available on campus starting this week, and actually 7 days a week, where they will be administering up to 5,400 doses per day. And this is the first one on the west side of town. And very excited. The university community is very excited to be able to offer this. And just go to myturn.gov, sign up, and take one of those slots and get your vaccination. So that's great news. More vaccination sites becoming available. Today, we're also going to get into some of the updates on PPP 2021, as I like to call it. And then also talk a little bit about the extension that hopefully is going to be coming. An extension, a 2-month extension did clear the House rather soundly, I'd say, 415-3. So it's really nice to see a House vote 415-3, isn't it? 415-3. So it makes it sound like it's going to probably get through the Senate, is my guess, requiring 60 votes, but get through the Senate. And that extension of time will be very necessary and very needed, and to get us through a lot of the work that we have to still do in our community with our smallest, neediest businesses and those that haven't applied before. We also have good news in the California Relief Grant Program. And for those of you that have gone through the process, and I've heard a lot of the issues with getting through the particular portal, the Lindustry portal, but we're also going to be talking about the $1.5 billion that is going to be available in rounds 6 and 7. And round 6 opens tomorrow. We'll go through a few of those details. We even have, look at that, we have the Shuttered Venue Operator Grant portal opening, which came out last week after the webinar, and it's going to be opening on April the 8th. We have our EIDL Pro tomorrow to answer all EIDL questions. I can be redundant on things that are really necessary and important, and that is one of them. The Employer Retention Tax Credit for 2020, we're starting to see a lot of clients utilize that program. And we're starting to see a lot of really good results from that. We don't have the guidance yet for 2021, but that's coming soon. We hope after the SVOG portal is open in April that the restaurant revitalization and that it is opening soon, and hopefully have it open sometime in April, and we'll have resources and all kinds. So along with that, if you have questions today, take your questions to the Q&A box. little shorthanded on support here, so we won't have much monitoring of the chat box, at least as we go, but put your questions in the Q&A. We have plenty of time for questions and answers afterwards. And uniquely, no poll today. You know, it's one of those rare weeks where we do not have a poll question, but we will obviously have more. So one thing we're going to have as far as more is a look ahead and try to show you where we're headed down this direction. Next week, we're going to have more of a discussion on PPP and EIDL advance, and we're going to look at the California Relief Grant, and we're going to look at some opportunities, timely enough, in the Latinx market and more. Next Wednesday, my colleagues and my coworkers at CSUB, our students and faculty, will all be off celebrating and honoring Cesar Chavez. I don't get Wednesday holidays, so maybe one day we'll get back to it. But since we, on Veterans Day, a Wednesday back in November, had to tailor and had it focused toward the veteran community, we're going to do the same with the same opportunities we're going to be talking about for sole proprietors and PPP today. So then on April 7th, we're going to jump into the thing that I've been promising you the last several weeks, the employer retention tax credit, and bring in an expert on that and have them talk to you about the nuts and bolts of that particular program as it pertains to 2020. And hey, in 2 weeks, we might even have guidance for the 2021 version of the employer retention tax credit. And then on 4/14, we'll get in and start getting ready for the restaurant revitalization programs. So many programs, so little time. And as my dad used to say, on April the 21st, we'll just cross that bridge when we get to it. So we're going to start with something a little new today, and it's a tip. And it's a tip from one of our viewers, Cheryl, thank you. And it is really timely because when we came out with this information, going way back to the early part of the pandemic, I think that a lot of the industry and trade groups were struggling to find out what was going on. Well, they have caught up, and they have really provided some great leadership to those in their particular industries, ranging from professional services to the nonprofit sector. So if you have a trade or industry group, follow them for suggestions on the various programs that are out there, and a lot of the nuts and bolts that are really kind of the details and sticky points to each of this. So look at that. Look at your trade associations and some of the things that are going on. So here's just a quick page that we go through each week on trying to keep all the various programs open. Again, I think that's going to be my new motto moving forward. So many programs, so little time. Second draw PPP is open. If you do apply for that, remember we've talked about some of the reasons you need to show a loss of revenue for 25% from 19 to 2020. What you want to do is contact your lender. First draw PPP is open for far more people than it was before. So, and we're even finding more people that are learning about this, and hopefully the word is spreading far and wide. So it's open, contact your lender. The venues, the Shuttered Venue Occupation Grant is opening on April the 8th, conveniently the day after our April 7th webinar. So prepare right now for a lot of the things that you need to do to be prepared for when that particular portal opens. It'll be an SBA portal like the EIDL. The California Relief Grant portal, again, is open for those that have not already entered. If you've already entered and already put in your information from Lindustry and are on the wait listed, the wait list is going to get a heavy dose of application success, I might add, with these next couple of rounds, as a huge amount of money is going to be put out. So if you're in, you're in. If you're not in, you can get in starting tomorrow for round 5. The Restaurant and Bar Grant Program, now that we're calling Restaurant Revitalization, it's going to be opening the last half of April, as we mentioned. Also, the Employer Retention Tax Credit, we'll have more on that in 2 weeks. EIDL loan is open. The EIDL Advance, the EIDL Targeted Advance is really a great tool. We're really Mr. Williams is going to discuss that in great detail tomorrow, but there's been $35 billion that have been allocated to that since the Economic Aid Act that was signed into law in 12/27/2000. And more was added recently to the recent stimulus. So there's a lot of money that's going out to targeted communities, and more information on that tomorrow. Our City of Bakersfield Restart Loan is open, Restart Loan to Grant. It opened on 3/15. Who you're going to want to contact is either the city's website or Access Plus Capital, who is handling the online registrations and applications for that particular program. On PPP forgiveness, we're still looking for a little bit of guidance that's out there. It is open. Our suggestion, our recommendation for several weeks has been to wait. What we found is a lot of programs, since they evolve over time and the rules change over time, we're giving you the information that is current today on March 24th. So what we have found is with a lot of the PPP forgiveness and other programs is, amazingly, procrastination has been a great tool. It has been great for a lot of people who have waited until the rules changed, and it's really been advantageous. So PPP forgiveness at one time was one of those. And so a lot of people we're finding with the second round of PPP that if your forgiveness was in process, it was creating what I used to like to call error codes. I've been corrected. That is, I think, called something else, but I'm going to stick with error codes because I can remember that. PU unemployment for contractors, that needs to be updated. That last is now open until I believe it is September the 5th. Said the extension was coming. So actually that's open now till September the 6th. So for a couple of things with PPP, I'm going to jump into a couple of examples right away where I really want to kind of go over kind of the changes over the last couple of weeks and what has happened. Just kind of our big numbers for PPP that have been updated as of Sunday. We see that $195 billion of the $284.5 billion has been allocated. The average loan size is not 6, but it is going down and headed that direction. It is in the low 60,000 range now. It went down to 63,000. And for the last week, what we've seen is about 14 billion in activity, with the average loan size really down there, 39,000. Remember, the average loan size for the first round of the CARES Act funding for PPP, the average loan size was nearly $100,000, I think, ending around 96,000. And so now we are at 63,000 and we're trending even smaller. So we're seeing a lot of the smaller businesses that are getting in for the first time or getting a second dose of PPP receive many more of the smaller amounts. So just a couple of things that I found kind of interesting, and this is by NACE code, and which of course is the industry classification codes that you get to put on your application. It's on your tax return. Is that this was for loan approvals for the first 2 months of the CARES Act funded program ended May 30th, 2020. So if you look at that, the percentage of loan amount, it was healthcare and social assistance, almost 13%. Also second then was professional and scientific technical services, which was close. Construction was up there as well, and manufacturing about 10%. And we fell all the way down to accommodation and food services, about 8.8% of that total. So what is kind of fascinating, at least from my standpoint, is the last 2 months of PPP 21 for 2021, and you see that now 17% of that is accommodation and food services. And much of that could be because of the additional funding that went out for those in the 72 series of NACE codes that was accommodation and food businesses, to where they were able to access 3.5 months rather than 2.5 months. So that could account for a lot of it, but then construction jumped up solidly in the second position. Well, we saw professional, scientific, and technical services fall a little bit. And healthcare fell out of the top slot and manufacturing remained the same. So where the PPP funds changed dramatically from the first 2 months of those programs, at least by the types of businesses that actually jumped in to access those funds. So what I want to do is I want to kind of share with you something different here. Is I want to jump in here and look at some PPP examples. And I was going to we pulled up in the past a week or two, the sole proprietor tax return, the Schedule C off of your 1040 package for those sole proprietors. So you'll recall on March 5th, the rules changed as far as calculating sole proprietors. And it did calculate in midstream. And I did hear from plenty of you who already had your applications in. And there's still nothing out there that's going to change those that already accessed PPP before the rule changes. If something changes on that, we will be we might not be the first, but we'll definitely let you know. So let's just go through 3 examples. And I really want to pinpoint the opportunity that is out there now for sole proprietors who maybe didn't get in the first time, or maybe for some reason have had their application delayed or whatever. So let's jump into example number 1 here. And it's a sole proprietor with no employees. And if you look at their gross income, and if we were looking at the tax return, that would be income before all of your operating expenses. It only takes sales and reduces by cost of sales. Your gross income, which is line 7. And then we go through about 24 lines of expenses. It could be anything from rent to employee benefit programs to supplies, all kinds of stuff. So after you subtract all those, you get your net profit. And so for this calculation, on April 3rd, if you take the date that when the PPP originally came out, you were entitled to $2,572. So with the more recent changes, being able to look at that line 7 instead of line 31, the individual now is able to access $20,833, which of course is the maximum that any business owner can pay themselves salary. And that is true for sole proprietorships. It is true for LLCs, for S Corps, for C Corps, for every legal entity. The maximum if you take the 24-week covered period, which is essential also, 24 weeks will get you $20,833. So really a significant difference and really a huge impact for a small and needy business. If we look at the next example, we have sole prop number 2, which had 2 employees. So with 2 employees here with the same set of numbers, 12,345, they were able to get 8 weeks of payment or for over a 24-week covered period for their employees, which increased it to 15,072. Now, under today's rules and guidelines that came out after the guidance on 3.3, that number would jump to 33,333. And then also, let's use the last example. And our last example is a business that maybe generated $78,867. And let's say that their net income was minus. And it could be minus for a number of reasons. A lot of people have really good tax advisors out there. And if your net income or if your income was $78,000, there's a way that you can purchase assets in December and tax plan that profit away. So for many small businesses, what they do is they minimize that net profit. But that has really been a deterrent during this process because you had to use this number in order to cover yourself. So this theoretically, this business could have bought an $80,000 vehicle and wrote off that $80,000. Now, true, you had to use it 100% in your business, and you could have paid for it over 10 years, who knows, even 12 years on some equipment. But really, you could get that deduction in the year you take it that reduces your net profit. So now what you can do is you can go back to line 7 on gross income, and you can claim the gross income amount of $78,000, which entitles you to a PPP of $16,400. $431. So really a little few graphical examples of how this really works and really how this is really an opportunity now for so many smaller businesses, and really something that with an extension that we are anticipating is going to kind of bring us the next few weeks. The other thing that is really beneficial is the fact that now you can use a 2020 tax return that does not have to have already been filed with the IRS. It can be a draft. Now, really, I have to exercise, and I will every time I bring up this topic, that there has to be a great caution in this. You have to, when you come out with the draft, you have to file that tax return at a later date, but there might be information that precludes you from filing the tax return now. I'm under the impression that even if you hadn't filed your 19 tax return yet, which would have kept you from qualifying for a PPP, you can now go in and do a draft based on what your 2020 actual income and actual expenditures are, and have that draft and use it to actually get a PPP loan right now. Now, you'll need to provide other information such as an invoice, a bank statement, other records showing that you were operating. And this is for contractors and other businesses without employees. For the second draw, there's other factors that you have that come into play. I think we've talked about this in the past, and really I think our example on this topic today kind of covered this. And I really don't want to take up more time on this particular subject, but that is the opportunities. These are the opportunities that are available to us for our small businesses. And really, they're going to be open, it looks like, with an extension of PPP until the 31st. Okay. So PowerPoint's arguing with me right now. It doesn't really want to cooperate, which it's known to do from time to time. So let's try this. Let's look up here real quick before we get to our guest speaker, and look at one last item up here, and that is just going to go back to the Schedule C. And there you see where line 7 is the gross income off your Schedule C. You see all of your expenditures that are hit by it to where you get net profit on line 31. Okay, now we'll see if it's cooperating. And that's all it took. So a couple of things real quick as we wind up. The California Relief Grant we mentioned is going to be open. This period, this first round, this next round, if you're not in, ends on Wednesday, the 31st of March. So it ends next Wednesday. If you're not in, if you are, you're considered waitlisted and your application is being considered for round 5. Round 6 will be determined later. And both of these rounds are $725 million rounds. The entire first round was for rounds 1 and 2 were for 447 million. So substantially a lot more with the budget changes and more information. Target EIDL advance information you can get tomorrow. We have the tax credit coming up, and it's time to introduce our special guest today. It's a pleasure to introduce to you Morgan Clayton, for those of you that don't know him, and that would be those of you that are outside of Bakersfield. And Morgan is the founder, president, CEO of Tel-Tec Security Systems, Inc. Firm started in 1982, provides full service security to homes and businesses, hospitals, schools throughout California and Nevada. Morgan loves seeing young people grow in their roles at his company, and is the most rewarding result of his family's involvement in the particular business. But really, Morgan's hallmark on the community of Bakersfield and even Kern County is his community involvement. And he's received the very cherished John Brock Award service that we've talked about in the past for distinguished dedication to others. He served on countless boards, commissions, and other nonprofits promoting a better community. And it is my pleasure to introduce to you Morgan Clayton. Morgan, as I end my share here, take it away.
Kelly, thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me today, and really just kind of sharing some perspectives on how to really advance knowledge and then being able to help those who weren't able to access the PPP. Probably one good way to start out might be to talk a little bit about starting business in 1982 and what that looked like in a very depressed environment. And I thought it would be good to give you kind of the 4 R's that I ran the business on and still look at today, along with the 4 guiding principles. So basically, the 4 R's where I basically focused on right person, right seat, right things, and then having the right price. And then one key thing, no surprises. The 4 guiding principles that I keep in front of me all the time that I think are still very, very relevant today is, number 1, we are all called to do good works. We are all called to do good works. Number 2, we must respond to the signs of the times that we're in. Number 3, remember the people and their families and not the numbers that we so often have to strive to get every day in business, but remember the people's needs and their families. And lastly, the secret to change is to focus on the new. And so as we think about the new and we start to navigate into how and what we can do in this idea of helping those who are small business entrepreneurs, proprietors, to be able to really get into helping understand how to access PPP. I really want to extend a deep thank you to those individuals and proprietors who helped me to frame this up. What I'm excited about is kind of walking everybody through it, really getting some feedback and maybe questions on it to see if you believe it is truly the pathway that Kern County, the city, can take to really help those who are left out, fast track it, and really help people to accelerate 2 things: opportunities, jobs, and getting businesses back open and doing what they love to do best, which is to serve people and to enjoy their prosperity. So as we talk about this draft concept, the idea of it is a one master small business workshop series. And what that really means is how do we very quickly get business together, analyze them, get what they need, get the approvals so that they can access all the things you talked about, Kelly, relative to the PPP, the IDC, and the CA California Relief Grant. So this is what the framework looks like. Let me kind of share. Basically, for those of you that may be aware, we have what we call now a B3K Executive Committee, which is really looking across Kern County at the 5 areas of where we can really accelerate our community and make it grow. The area of concentration that I'm in is with entrepreneurship, and I'm sharing it with some great minds and colleagues that I won't run off their names because we want to use our valued time now, but basically they are champions to make sure that this process works. And one part of our scope of work is the inclusion of small business, minority-owned and women-owned businesses. And so as we think about this concept, this is basically what happened. I basically went to the barbershop one day, Saunders Barbershop I go to in Southeast Bakersfield, and I set an appointment to go see him to get a haircut. And when I was there talking with him, obviously COVID compliant, just he and I in the barbershop, to make sure that everybody understands that we were both safe. He was sharing with me, because I was sharing with him, I got the PPP and I was excited about moving forward and managing payroll and that kind of thing. And he said, well, he didn't get it. And a lot of his customers that he had got haircuts from didn't get it. And I was shocked by that. And so I said, interesting. I said, because the process is pretty straightforward. So what I found out was that a lot of people were left out because they weren't considered in the process. And that concerned me. So I felt that in order to achieve a good conversation, you got to have good data. And that data has to be measured. So what I did was I reached out to some good friends like Keith Woolrich, along with D. Slade with the African American Network. And quickly I got a list of 75 small businesses that did not go to the PPP over in Southeast Bakersfield. And I reached out to people like Keith, Bryce, and the city and the mayor, and really kind of shared some concepts with them. And this is what happened. The results that came back from this survey, really that was done by my sister-in-law with me not being a part of it so I could get the data being true. There were 2 things that came out of it. One, there were people that had very good habits, and there were people that had very poor habits. And basically, when we look at habits, we really are not blaming. It's not a fault issue. It's that it's not a fault of their own, but people were simply modeling behaviors that they had in Southeast Bakersfield from their families, friends, relatives, maybe the community. And a lot of the business transactions, when you start to align it with the PPP and other things like mid-state development, there becomes a problem. And the problem is that you quickly find that there are barriers and conflicts because the way that you may be operating your business in Southeast Bakersfield does not align with the city, the county, the banking institutions, that kind of thing. Let me give you some examples, just two, as we continue to talk on about the process. One would be licensing requirements, where you may not be aware of having a city license and having the appropriate licensing. The other is the accounting practices and making sure that we found that people were putting their home budget management together with their businesses. So they were commingling both, which you cannot do. Banking and other financial institutions have to segregate out your business practices from your home practices. And a lot of people were just not told and don't know that. So it wasn't a judgment as much as people just didn't know. And so in my mind, after going through a lot of these concerns, I started sitting down, thinking about it, reflecting on it, praying on it, saying, what is it that can be done to really help these small business people? So I started exploring through people that I've talked to and shared with, that I entrust, especially through the B3K. How do we get a process in place that helps these people to get evaluated? And here it is. And let me lay it out for you very quickly so you can give me feedback. The Small Master Business Program Workshop Series really is designed to bring small business people in to measure and assess them very quickly online. So basically, we're doing it online, so it's very quick, it's very safe, and taking you through virtual workshops. And in the beginning, in order to be sure that it works, I've talked to Mrs. Johnson, that basically is with Upside Productions. She's going to select 8 small business people that basically we can take through this small cohort. And this cohort is going to basically dive into this strategy so that we can pull the data out to make sure we're on track before we scale this out. One is that we want the business person to come in and really know who they are relative to their skill sets. We want them to know what the behaviors are that are required to do business in the city and the county and how you address those activities. We want to address the idea of how you service and support clients relative to being sure that you're on point with the way you're delivering your service and your quality. And then what we want to do is do something very interesting. We want to do a confidential pathway report back to that individual so that they know how they look or how their business characteristics look or how their profile looks, so that they can see the difference between them and others, so that they know where they're strong, where they're weak, and where they need to improve. And once you get that data, then you're able to go into the following. We bring you into the small cohort where, first of all, now that you've identified your profile of who you are, we want to celebrate that with a photo op, maybe with the mayor, the city, a number of people, business people, to say, good job, well done, because you've worked your tail off and earned it. The second is a certificate of completion you can proudly post and show you've got the education now as a baseline. But number 3, and here's the thing that's most important, basically Kern County has several different chambers of commerce that all have different visions and how they see things and do things, reacting to what their business clients need. But as a business person, you want to align with that, because that is the voice of business feeding up through the government, the city, and the county. So what we do is we give you a grant, a seed grant, and the seed grant is for you to go and create memberships in all of those chambers so that you can start interacting and talking with the people about how I can be a better business person and address these questions. 1, what is it that I want? Why do I want it? My plan of action based on the criteria you've developed through going through these programs that are online. The online programs are conducted by Dr. Ken Robinson, really good friend of mine as a consultant. We've already been doing some pilot cohorts, but now we're getting ready to make it go into business, called a Master Series. We are partnering with the John Maxwell Foundation basically to use their measurement criteria in partnership with UC Fullerton Center of Research, which basically correlates all this data to give us feedback. So it's much more of us knowing how to guide and track you. So imagine when you come in with this criteria and now you're sitting down and say, okay, I know who I am, I know what I want, I know where I want to go. That is the foundation for your business plan. Now, when I started my business back in March of 1982, I formed a business advisory group made up of 4 people. It was my CPA, an experienced business person, myself, along with another business partner in town that basically sat down and said, tell us what you're doing, why you're doing it. And it allowed me to sustain myself through tough times in 82. So as you look at this business plan development, and you come into now going into the chamber, and you've now paid for the membership to go into the chamber, here's the vision of what I'm hoping that people will like. The chambers of commerce now create this network called a collaborative of all chambers in the valley, not taking them away from their vision, but really coming together to take that brain trust and center it. And for most of us who know the Network for Children in Kern County, it's that kind of concept. It's all the cities and the counties working together, but when they need to come together and focus, like, for example, on child deaths or something like the virus, they're centered. Well, the business community needs to center its power so that the small business collaboratives can come in, and the business individual who now has their business plan can now walk into these voice of chambers in this collaborative, and they can talk about who is the right leadership that can help this person. Who are the mentors that can help them navigate into building networks and basically socializing from the standpoint of developing the right pathway. Business plan review, which is to look at how you put yourself out there and make sure that you've managed your risk properly. And what happens, we have one communication hub. So now that as the B3K Executive Committee and other economic development things take off, you now have a central hub for good information for starting to scale your business. The idea is that if this all comes together, you now have a data center that collectively brings the data back into the B3K, so you can say, how can we elevate this? And then your appropriate funding streams that have been approved for these things, such as the city, the county, they can bring funding back into the collaborative and fund and help these small businesses that are Southeast, Oilville based, or other struggling communities to elevate themselves out of the risk that they're in. Right now, in summary, going back to it, the idea of the whole workshop is to give a person an inside-out approach, and the outside is the support system that kind of navigates them through this process. And that's how I feel that the inclusion of small minority business will be able to actively not only receive PPP, but have the appropriate disciplines and have the appropriate guiding tools so that as business and other financial tools enter into it, because how they enter into it would be the following. When you have the collective come together and I walk in with my business plan, and let's say that the Kern County Chamber of Commerce and the Black Chamber of Commerce and Hispanic Chamber of Commerce all have given me a mentor based on my needs, I then could go to somebody like the Keith Bryce over at Mid-State Development, because I want to expand my business. Well, he sees I've got mentorship, I've got people supporting me. Now he starts to say what his criteria is needed, what is needed in order to successfully connect with him or finance institution or whatever marketing particular company that might be out there. But basically there's a single hub, so you can basically monitor this from a standpoint of some succeeding and not all will succeed. But here's the thing I think that's so interesting about life. When you find out what you are not good at, that's a good thing, because what it tells you is what you need to stop doing. So if your small business isn't going to be successful, which I'm hoping that it does, but if it doesn't, you pivot into employment opportunities through the same process. But if you find out that you can accelerate, then you'll find yourself in the right place, doing the right things at the right time. And going back to my summary, which is how I started my business in 82, right person, right seat, focused on the right thing, looking at the right price with no surprises. The key thing about successful business is if you have no surprises, you can be successful. If you look at the pandemic and all the other things that have hit us, it's all because of surprises, and we have to pivot. So keep that in mind, and I'm going to go ahead and now move on to any Q&A that may come up so that we can basically address questions. And Kelly, thank you for this time today. And hopefully I have walked through this quickly and fast enough to connect with people to give them a clear understanding of what the concept is, because it still has to be worked through via the pilot. Thank you.
Fantastic stuff, Morgan. Do you mind if I share the flow chart that you provided me earlier?
Oh, please do. That's fine.
Okay, let's go there. Okay, so this is kind of, and let me just give a little bit of, B3K is the beautiful Bakersfield Boundless Kern initiative that we're currently going through as far as economic development strategy for Kern County and the city of Bakersfield, for those that don't know that. So this is kind of a breakdown of their 5 groups that Morgan has come up with. And then we hit under entrepreneurship, the inclusion of small businesses, of which are essentially minority and women-owned business. And kind of this takes you through a graphic version of exactly everything Morgan just articulated. So Morgan, anything out there jumps out that you'd like to add?
I think it's great. I think the idea of the draft was so that everyone could see it. So if there was a better idea that you saw as you saw the flow, please invite that conversation in. I know that all of our group, our team that's on the B3K, T, myself, Norma, JP, and all of us are excited about the solution. So all I really want to say is I am excited about getting the process in place so we can get money in hand, but we want to measure, monitor, validate, and make sure we're on the right path. That's the key.
Fantastic. Okay, so let's try to engage some discussion here. And if you wouldn't here, go into the chat box if you have any comments, any questions on how this might work, how this could be replicated even for other communities outside of Bakersfield. Anything that you might want to add or support. I just think that the opportunity is so great right now with the programs that are opened, and particularly kind of the PPP examples that we've gone through. There's a preference in the EIDL advanced program is only going to go into these underserved communities in these markets. So there's a ton of money that they have out there. It is just trying to pull in those businesses that are the smallest and neediest that actually need this money, and to try to get them into that process of what the government's going to need. So isn't that how you see it, Morgan?
That's exactly how I see it. I think the key thing is that the idea, when you go into these inner city communities, they have had behaviors, again, no fault of their own, where they've either bartered or just basically did what they had to do to live, which we all understand. But when you come out of that baseline and you now want to inject into the marketplace, there is a behavior of how I behave and processes of how I need to respond in order to get the kind of response that you want, which is, yes, I want access to the money. Well, in order to get access, we need to make sure you understand what the behavior is and what it looks like. And this process will do that without pointing fingers or causing blame. It's really collaborative working together in a fast, quick way.
So a couple of the things in the chat box that are coming up are, could you please hit those 4 points about the right seat, etc.?
Yeah, basically, when you go to establish the foundation, here's the key. First of all, right person or persons, right person sitting in the right seat, doing what they need to do, right thing or things, and basically right price, which is no surprises. And I'll basically put this together and email it over so you can get it out to your group. And I didn't know if they wanted the guiding principles or not, those 4, but real quickly, I'll share with you what they were. The guiding principles were simply, we are all called to do good work. So therefore, it's putting yourself in a positive note of not hand out, but hand up. Number 2, we must respond to the sign of the times. And obviously today we can clearly see that. Number three, respond to the people and their families and not get caught up in the numbers. A lot of times we will talk about solutions, but sometimes we get caught up in the baseline of debits and credits rather than what the people really need, even though we know the numbers are important. But focus on the needs, not the numbers. And the fourth is the secret to change is to focus on the new. It's very difficult sometimes for people to pivot out of poor habits. I'll give you this one. I find this always interesting, Kelly. Here's one, I'll share it with you. Young lady invites her mom over to her home, and it's Thanksgiving time, and mom says, you know what, I'm going to prepare the ham. So the daughter looks at the mom and says, Mom, why are you cutting the ham? Why don't you just put the whole ham in the oven? And the mom says, well, we've always cut the ham. And the daughter said, well, why? She said, well, because the oven was too small. And today we have large enough ovens where you can put the whole ham in. And sometimes people will bring those kinds of traditions and habits into business, into home, or other situations where they will not simply ask the question because they've always just done things the way that they've done them before. So be able to pivot to the new. And what does that look like? And so this is a new concept to address concerns where people say, hey, we're left out, or they may feel that their people are being left out for racial reasons or other reasons, but it's a process. And the process is connecting all the dots. And I think we've done a good job of getting most of those connected, but there's still maybe some that we've left out.
Few questions that are coming up, Morgan, is what tool will be used to access Pathway Forward?
I think the tool to be used to access Pathway Forward is the individual sitting down and talking about what is it that they envision as the next step. I always put down Pathway Forward as an open dialogue that simply says, okay, every year in a business, you have to strategically sit down and envision the future. And so the pathway forward is what? What are the strategic steps? And one of them, I'll tell you right now, all the people who are in restaurants, they would simply say, wait a minute, we have the greatest menu, the greatest setting. Well, now that you got 25% people getting in, you got to do curbside pickup. So now the pathway forward is what? The pathway forward are the steps we need to take by way of cost, risk, assessment, and again, right person, right seat, right thing, right price. What is that pathway? So that's the pathway forward of the 4 Ps.
Question is, can you provide a copy of the flow chart? And I think Morgan wants this distributed, so we will gladly email it with the rest of the resources that we tend to do after the webinar on Thursday or Friday.
Yeah, it's open. Basically, what the game plan is the basically entrepreneurship or the B3K. We're going to pilot it. And basically, I've got JP and I've got T, I've got Norma and others that we're collaborating together to pilot this to say, hey, is it effective? Because we want the city, the county, and others to bless the process. But the key is it giving the right outcomes so that people's risk assessment and dollars are being measured, monitored, and we're getting the outcomes we want. It's really about outcome performance. And so if we can make that happen in a fast way, I feel very confident we can do it once the pilot's done, because for me, everyone can't fit into one box. And I think that's what's happened historically when you look at poor, underserved communities, is everybody tends to get the same food basket, the same amount of water, you get on the line, you get the same of everything, when I don't see that as the solution. It's really a temporary fix, but it's not the solution, because some people have 1 child, some have 6, some have 3, just like in businesses, single proprietor versus 6, 10. What is the pathway for you? And that's what I'm hoping we can come through with. So yes, share it.
So how do you submit your business or another business for the workshop opportunity? And is it available for nonprofits?
Yeah, I think where we want to start is you probably want to communicate with Upside Productions, T. Johnson, Natasha. We're kind of all putting it together now. So I'm being very, very cautious not to scale it, but we're going to pilot it, then scale it. And then through the B3K, we will know how to service everyone with a template that is standard. And now our measurements, tools, delivery of capital and management would be the same. So basically, I certainly share it I like to share information because in that synergy, great ideas will come out, but we haven't really launched it as a final product. This is just a draft.
Is there any way to quantify the changes these business owners would need to make?
Yeah, right now I'm collaborating with the CSU Fullerton Center of Research to give me that data. I know there are other centers. I know CSUB, obviously Kelly, we could obviously through CSUB, we can start to develop how do we measure these things by for-profit, nonprofit. I just haven't basically started those climbs yet because we're just beginning the process to see what will work. But we certainly can do that. That won't be difficult to do. We can quantify it easily.
Morgan, have you identified specific gaps in federal programs that need attention?
Not yet, but I will tell you where my baseline begins is listening. What I have found is the very core of it, going down to the very core of who hasn't been served. It's simply those businesses that over the years that have, quote, managed themselves by their own habits that they've received from others that aren't aligned with the marketplace. They're not connected to the real economic engine. So that's where I'm at, is dealing with the underserved, forgotten groups that are not connected. And once we connect that, we can certainly accelerate straight up where I think it's going to be very easy to do the alignment because we have the tools. I mean, when you look at mid-state development, KEDC, Small Business Development Center, all of the great work that Cal State does and what you guys do and the people I know that are out there, the city and the county, we have the tools. We just simply have to get the people in the right bucket. That's the issue. And right now we don't have a bucket that serves those who don't know how to connect to a process. And this, I think, will help without judgment.
Yeah, we've got an opportunity now with these federal and the state program that are so time sensitive. It's like we have 10 weeks to try to get as much out to our smallest and neediest businesses in any way the SBDC can help you in that. Oh, here's another question. How about opportunities for women of color over 65 and to get back into business that was affected by COVID?
That is exciting to me by way of, I would love to do a cohort of 8 women in that age group and men to find out exactly what their skill sets and need sets are relative to just maybe repivoting from skill sets that they have where we can put them with mentorships or partnerships with the university or realign them at Bakersfield College. That really excites me, but I don't have anything framed up like that, but I'd love to do that. That'd be really cool to do.
Okay, last question, and then we're going to roll into the other Q&A box for the other pandemic relief programs. But your last question, Morgan, is how are the men, women, and businesses being selected for the pilot? And are you already in the process to get ready to roll out the workshops?
The workshops are ready. I've already got the approval from all of the appropriate people. Right now, I've just talked with Upside Productions to look within her 75 businesses to give me 8. We haven't come up with a process, but I guess Natasha will come up with that with a fair process to give me a fair group of men, women, basically reflective of our demographic, looking at the people we serve, so we have a good outcome, and then scale it. So at this point, we got to take that step, but I can tell you the process is ready. We just got to get the people in it to do the measurements.
Exciting stuff. Again, any way we can help and any way we can get this jump started and rolling, we're all for it. Well, thank you. Stick around and let's see if any other questions will pop in at the end. But in the meantime, I'm going to roll over here into the Q&A box and kind of get to some of the questions from earlier. And again, I select the shorter ones first because, they're easier. We always have the slides available, and actually a recording of this will be sent out to everybody who registered, which is kind of a tradition that comes with other resources. We try to send copies of everything that we talked about today. So that'll come in a bulk email on Thursday or Friday. I got a PPP2 using line 31 on Schedule C. Now SBA is using line 7. What can I do to get the difference? My bank is not answering the phone. Gosh, I hate it when your bank doesn't pay the phone bill. But right now, there is really no recourse. Right now, we have a date. I believe it is March 5th, that if you were funded before March 5th, using the line 31 calculation, then that is kind of what you have. If you were not, then you're able to actually use line 7. It's a difficult situation. There could be something down the road because a lot of these have changed. We've seen a number of programs that have changed where there's been kind of something that isn't fair. And, it's rightly so. It kind of, the rules changed midstream. And unfortunately, you're on the wrong end of the river. Both of my banks have closed their PPP portals. What would be the best place to find a PPP that is not local? Well, I was looking at the list today of the actual banks and the ones that are making loans, and there's some fintechs out there that are really focused and concentrated. Matter of fact, by the number of loans, the 2 largest ones are fintech companies. I would still encourage you to maybe they're waiting to see if the extension is coming, because I'm seeing that there's still a lot in the pipeline as far as PPP goes, even though there is about $100 billion left, or $90 billion. There's a significant amount of that in that pipeline. And really, that's kind of a concern, that even if it gets extended to May 31st, is that money going to last? And one of the reasons why we look at that total every week. I would look locally, but there are some fintechs. If you want, I can share with you the top 10 list of people that are making loans, entities that are making loans, and some of those are financial technology startups. For those of you that are asking about how to sign up for the EIDL seminar tomorrow, we will have an e-blast. So if you usually find out about this webinar on our email, our bulk email, we will be sending out one later today that is going out. So that will be coming there. If not, you can always email me at kbearden, BEARDEN @csub.edu, and I will gladly forward you a link. Let's see. So here's a question. We do not even know how long PPP is going to be around. Well, officially, it's going to be around till March 31st. That is very likely going to be changed to May 31st. How can a new business get startup funding? Well, there is a deadline. There is a date that you have to have been in business, and that date goes back to before the pandemic. So it goes back to February 15th, 2020. If you were in business after that date, then if you went into business after that date, you still do not qualify for PPP. If you were an existing business in business before, then you are certainly eligible to go after that particular money. Also, if you bought a business, there are some rules that came out that if you bought a business before a certain date, that you would be eligible. So there are a certain number of rules, but really that 2/15/20 date for being in business is pretty hard and fast. Another question or two. Which years do you have to show the 25% drop in revenue? For the second helping of PPP2, you have to show that your business has been impacted, and you can pick any quarter, any calendar quarter, 1 through 4, and you can compare your results in 2020 compared to 2019. Most businesses had a higher revenue in 2019 before the pandemic. Kind of obvious, but then you have to show a 25% drop in any one of the 4 quarters. So you don't have to really complete your 2020 taxes yet. You just have to show a revenue drop. And actually, for those businesses that are 150,000 and under, you don't even have to produce the documentation for that at this point. You will need to at some point, and please recall, again, we mention this every week, that there are going to be a lot of audits in this particular program. So really, it's important to keep your documentation together and to keep your ducks in a row. I have a federal tax lien, and it's holding up my second draw PPP. We are not aware of any liens, and The SBDA has not given his bank any insight as to what they cannot find on the credit transcripts or reports. You know, on specific questions like this, I think you need to contact SBA directly. And I think the best way to do that is to attend one of their webinars on PPP and get there early and put this question in the question box bright and early. It might require somebody, if there is an issue with a tax lien or a federal lien that is or is not true, it is an opportunity, but it generally is going to hold things up. There's a lot of validation codes, not error messages, validation codes that have been put into place to reduce the amount of fraud, and that has slowed it up, and that has contributed to that enormous kind of backlog, or that backlog that exists in the pipeline for PPP right now. And your case is a perfect example of that. Okay, that's it for questions. I guess that's pretty much it. Again, we will, if you can go to the tiny URL with the / of EIDL Advance to register for tomorrow. Most of you will be getting this as an email that's sent out later today. We'll get that out to you. So again, great opportunity and some really timely advice on EIDL, and with the big news today about the increase in the EIDL loan from 150 to 500, accessing that hopefully will come up tomorrow as well. So next week we'll be back with Circe Lucina Davila Cox with our guest speaker. She is our SBDC consultant, our Spanish speaking, working in some of the great areas of the Southeast Bakersfield with a lot of Hispanic clients, accessing numerous pandemic programs. That'll be on March 31st, which is also Cesar Chavez Day. So for Morgan Clayton, Morgan, thank you for the great information. And it's a program we're all looking forward to, and really some great work there.
Kelly, thank you. And just excited to get started with doing it together. Let's do it.
Let's go. Let's go. We got, I think, till May 31st. Let's get some money out there. So at least at the first phase of this. So for Morgan, I'm Kelly Bearden. Thank you for joining us. Have a great day, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye, everybody.